I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
Welcome to Thoughtspeak, a podcast dedicated to the discussion of K. Applegate's 1996 book series, Animorphs. My name is Coleman.
And my name is Mitchell, and welcome back to Thoughtspeak, everybody. It's time once again. I know we are not always the most prompt at delivering these things, but hey, we ain't stopping. It ain't stopping us. 4 years now, hasn't stopped us.
We know that you guys believe in us, and as long as you keep doing that and you keep clapping to make us realize that we're real people, we will continue putting these out here.
Oh, hell yeah. And
that was a hook reference. That was a hook reference. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I get you. Yeah. You sidetracked me with that one. Robin Williams, totally. Rufio, all the way.
Yeah. What year? Can you name the year? You know the year?
94.
I don't know the year, so I don't know. I'm supposed to tell you.
Oh, well, then...
I feel like it was like 92
really
or 93.
dumb tangent.
It's a great tangent.
what I got out of this. Right away, before everybody clicks off, we should probably thank our Patreon sponsors, because these are the people that are keeping the show afloat, making it happen. And as we always do, we take the time to personally thank each one of them by butchering their names in a long-winded list that I ramble off now. So, without further ado... Oh, here we go again. Thank you to John Maz, New Guy, Toasty Flatworm. Bravo, sir.
It's a good one.
Mr. Peter Scholl, Noah Troutman, Jeremy Baxter, Amanda Mimic, Tomb Juice. Another one, not sure if this is new or not. Oh boy. Arishag, use your real name, folks, if you don't want me to butcher it.
That's probably his real name. That's terrible. We appreciate and respect all names of any cultures. We try our best.
We're getting there. Graith, David C., Kevin Koslowski, Kevin K. is what he's going to be from now on. Jennifer Baker, James Miola, Jason Thompson, Ben Freeman, Tony Pazak, Kelly Brown, Josh Blount, Andrew Walker, Count Canicula, Nita Labrada Gaffaro, Tim Aheen, Daniel Martinoli, Michael Blemick, and Steven Adams.
We appreciate all of you. We're glad to have the new people as well as the old. This is what really keeps the show going, what helps support us, and it covers the cost of the podcast. This ain't free. It's not cheap.
Oh, absolutely. And this is Patreon. You feel good knowing that you are totally responsible for the awesome new website redesign that Coleman was able to whip up.
Yeah, if you haven't checked it out, head on over to www.thoughtspeakcast.com, where you see our brand new website. I think it's a cool little section now for if you want to comment on our episodes, or if you want to hit up the archives, which I think are much easier to search now. There's a whole lot of new links and stuff on there to check out, and I think it's just a better design overall for having fans interact with us or talking to us. We've also kind of rebooted our Twitter, which we have a Twitter feed on our website now, but if you want to talk to us on Twitter, we're at Morphcast. Just making big moves. And you might be thinking to yourself, whoa, you guys are about to review book number 43, The Test. You're practically at the end of the series. Why are you revamping your website? Why do you have a new logo that doesn't look super Animorphs related?
No one was thinking that.
Everyone was thinking it. And for those of you thinking it, which was everyone, Mitch, do you want to clue them in? What might designs and goals we might have for the future?
I guess if you'd like to dramatically shift to me talking now. Well, if it wasn't apparent by Coleman's little request on the website for next series for us to discuss. Yeah, we are looking into the future of expanding the podcast after we wind down the Animorphs series and moving into some other middle grade fiction series and other nostalgic properties that the two of us have read throughout our years and really enjoyed and just want to talk about.
I think you're downplaying it. I think we have set our goals in mind. We're definitely going to do this. It's not a dream or a hope. We are becoming what I like to call a book nostalgia podcast. So it's not just Animorphs anymore. We're going to be going into other books that really matter to us as kids and matter to you, even if it's books that we've never read before. We want to hear your suggestions on what series we should tackle. We might not do entire series like we do with Animorphs, but I know we definitely want to hit up like Ender's Game, some of the other books in that series. We've got several Dinotopia books to read, and
we're both big fans. Yeah, we're both big fans of Darren Shan. A lot of his work. I really like some DJ McHale books, like the Pendragon series. Definitely want to get into. We've got a lot of ideas and just things that make us happy, book-wise, and stories that we want to share with other people, and just have a good time chatting with my buddy. Really, and there's it's all about.
And there's a lot of Goosebumps podcasts and things like that, so we'll probably try to hit the more obscure stuff. Maybe we'll do a couple episodes of Fear Street or like a particular Goosebumps book that stood out to us. But we're going to be jumping all over, and I think we're going to bring a lot more people in and some new people who, I've heard people start our podcast without having ever read Animorphs before, which is really strange to me. But
if our podcast becomes a companion piece for future new readers, that would just be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. So anyway, check out our new website. There's a handy link to our Patreon on there. If you haven't become a Patreon contributor yet, again, that helps us out a lot. And we're going to be changing that up as well and coming up with fun new possible goals and levels of patronage. So just
maybe go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say keep a lookout on all our social media and our website and everything, because things are shifting, and it's not to downplay the end of Animorphs. We're gonna hit that hard and put a lot of time into it, because we've been doing this for a while and it's a big deal for us to get to the end. But we're not done yet, so don't go elsewhere.
Maybe one day we'll even bring back the monthly Google Hangout chat sessions.
Yeah, those were pretty fun. It's just hard to coordinate everybody's schedules. But.
Absolutely. Well, that's going to be determined at a later date. Anyway, tonight, like you said before, we are reviewing Animorphs book number 43, The Test. And this was one that I don't remember ever reading as a child.
Oh, I definitely didn't read this one. I would have remembered. But I didn't read the last Taylor book either. So, these two books, I never knew that there was a enemy on par with Almost David that the Animorphs had, or specifically Tobias had.
Yeah. Recurring villain, I suppose. And you're right. I didn't read the last one with her until you and I just did. And one of the more interesting character villains, I would say. But would you like to read the back of the book or talk about the cover first?
Let's talk about the cover. That's our go-to lineage,
diving in point. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So kind of looks like baby puke. The
green,
scheme.
Yeah, absolutely. The green and the dark. And just the kid's face. No.
And Tobias, I don't remember this model for Tobias.
Well, actually, that's an interesting thing, because according to Seropedia here, this book featured a new Tobias cover model. Ursula Albano, the art director for Animorphs, shared this story with us. The discovery of new Tobias. We couldn't find a kid in time for the shoot, so the photographer asked the agency to send over any old kid to stand in. Our artist, David Mattingly, would alter him digitally to fit the character. Well, a boy showed up out of nowhere, skateboard in hand, and a knit hat pulled down practically to his eyes. When he pulled his hat off, we knew we found the perfect Tobias. Tanya, the editor, just loved him. He was blonder than the first Tobias, but it was perfect. A happy accident from a desperate situation. I, however, happen to think this yeah, like you said, this Tobias, he don't look right, does he?
Yeah, for this far in the series, he looks way, way too young, right?
Sure, yeah, it looks like a little boy.
He looks like he's like 10.
Well, here's the question, though. Does Tobias's human morph age with him or not? Because if it's, still 13-year-old Tobias from the beginning of the series, then maybe it is a little accurate.
I don't know. It's hard to tell. Have they ever talked about, don't they say in the later books in the end of the series that Tobias's his hawk morph ages? Doesn't he look like an old hawk?
Yeah, he does.
So the DNA within them is aging. Because he's constantly morphing out of his hawk.
Oh, I guess. I don't know. I'm looking forward to seeing if they address any of these really
I don't think they ever go into the
things.
age. I hope that his human morph is aging with him, because otherwise him and Rachel's dates have got to be pretty awkward, the mall. This little kid running around with Fligger and Rachel. And if in that instance, if they're just choosing their DNA to revert back and forth between different morphs, wouldn't that put a pause button on their normal DNA, like the human morph DNA?
That would be interesting. Then in theory, couldn't they just use morphing to stay alive forever?
Yeah.
Be immortal, practically?
They morphed like half the day every day or something into like another human form.
Or at least slow down their biological clocks.
And here's the other question. We're seeing more and more, extra morphine abilities. Could they just focus harder and kind of like tweak their age as they morph? They've been able to do other things similar to that, so possibly.
Oh, yeah. Well, either way, that all stems from the fact that this cover kind of looks like puke, as you mentioned, because the taxon is ugly as all sin, and I don't know if it's exactly what you or I had in mind for how the taxon should look.
No, so do you know those stress tubes that people always have? Those like, they're cylinders, and they've got like you can put your finger in each end. They kind of look like each end looks like kind of like a butthole. They're like stress squeeze things, and they have like a gel or a liquid inside them.
Yeah.
Those are what I always pictured as taxons, except when
with legs.
With legs, and then and like teeny tiny legs, and then when one of the ends opened, you'd have like just a ton of teeth, like just jagged all around, almost like a Sarlacc from Star Wars.
Oh, yeah. See, I always just kind of pictured something vaguely Zerg-like. Zerg from StarCraft.
Yeah.
Their little, their base units, the builders and stuff. Those things.
And I always like the idea that their eyes were like just embedded in this like fat, floppy head.
Yeah, it looks a little weird to see them almost on stalk eyes. It kind of looks like.
The teeny tiny little mouth when they're constantly eating everything. And I feel like this is just like a literal representation. Like the artist read the first description of a taxon, it's like, oh, they've got lobster claw-like hands. I'm going to draw actual lobster claws.
Yeah.
And even make them red.
Yeah, and whenever they mention the taxon legs, they always say cones. Cones. And they're little... I don't know. They should describe it more as like centipede-like or something, if that's what they're going for. These don't look like cones, but
no, I'd love to do representations of all the aliens, like hire an artist and just do what's in my head, because the Hork-Bajir would look vastly different. The taxons would look super different. Andalites are pretty close, although I think you could make them more original. The Andalites you see. In the cover arts and stuff are very, I don't know, awkward. I think make it look more like organic.
Yeah, more modern artists, I think, would give them a little bit more cool look.
In the so the inside cover, is this supposed to be Rachel or Taylor?
I'm led to believe it's Rachel because it just looks like the cover model for Rachel.
What if they just got her and like, hey, you're Taylor now, and just like darkened her face?
Well, another thing is that it's hard to tell, but it doesn't look like either one of her arms are a prosthetic limb, and
Well, the right one's
Taylor's face would. Well, yeah, that's true. But Taylor's face is also supposed to be horribly scarred, and her hair is supposed to be all shortened and
either way,
or whatever.
The Taxon in the foreground looks like, just for this perspective, it looks like a actual centipede sized, and we're just really close up on it.
Yeah, that's kind of what I imagined too. And Rachel's just normal size as well.
Yeah.
So it's really weird seeing like Tobias morph into Taxon, on the cover, and it's almost a somewhat scene pulled from the book for that inside flap, kind of in a way.
Even the tagline is somewhat related. It's Tobias is about to face his biggest fear, being tortured again.
Right. His only weakness.
Watch Animorphs on TV. Anyway, so I'm going to read the back.
Yeah, why are we talking about Taxons and tunnels and Taylors?
too early for that. Okay, so Tobias, the other Animorphs, and Axe have seen things so bizarre that no sane person would believe their story. No one would believe that aliens have taken over Earth and are in the process of infesting as many humans as possible. No one could believe the battles and missions and losses these 6 kids have had to deal with, and it's not over yet. Tobias has been captured by the same human controller that nearly tortured him to death once before. She claims that she's now part of the Yeerk peace movement, that she just needs a favor. Tobias isn't sure what to believe, but he knows that if the Animorphs and Axe don't find him soon, what he believes won't matter anymore, because he'll be dead.
And that's just the test. So that tells us about, I don't know, just the setup to this book.
Which is better than a lot of the other summaries.
I guess. I mean, it leaves a lot out, but then again, it couldn't just say, hey, Tobias and the team get duped into helping this chick almost blow up the town, and then they don't. But that's the kind of story we're dealing with tonight on Animorphs.
Yeah, and it's a story, man. It's something I can say I read in 2 sittings, and the only reason there was a break in there was purely by accident. It wasn't intentional.
Sure, I felt like this could have been a quick read as well. It just, to me, honestly felt like not a whole heck of a lot happened in terms of like actual plot and action and what the characters are doing.
Well, not a lot of physical action happened, and obviously there's a lot of introspection and Tobias' thoughts and stuff. But I thought this book, more than any we've had in maybe the last like 20 episodes, added a lot to the series, like morph lore, story lore, kind of just showing where like an evolution of the characters, where they are now. Just a lot, like quickly. The last few books have been sluggish in adding anything to the series lore, and this one just like threw a bunch on the table.
Yeah, this is definitely a noticeable change from the team that we've been with for quite a while now. And this one, yeah, like you said, even though it's kind of sort of filler, it almost, it doesn't feel like filler. And the way that the characters are sort of advanced, it's definitely more about character progression than the last couple I've been.
While this one is filler, I would say it's filler in the same sense that the David trilogy is filler. Like, yes, they didn't do some huge impact on the Yeerks, but I actually think that this hints towards quite a bit that they're going to do the Yeerks. And it also was a really important story to seeing, like, putting a marker in the ground of where the characters are at this point. So I think, technically, yeah, it's filler, but I'd say this is definitely not a skippable book.
No, and there's so much foreshadowing in this book about future events. I think this is where we start to see a lot of, you could say, questions arising.
Really, you can't really call this. I'm taking back the filler part. This continues a story that was brought up earlier in the series. So in my mind, that's a continuing arc. So this is an arc. It's not filler. Just like the David trilogy is an arc.
No, not at all. And you know what? It has a lot to deal with the Yeerk peace movement faction. and we definitely wanted more of them. And although those characters don't necessarily make an appearance in this book, their involvement can't be overlooked, and it's cool to know that they're still willing to dive into that topic and how it affects our characters morally and whatnot.
I thought this book did a good job of, without spoiling too much, did a great job of Visitor 3 taking more of that Darth Vader role than being the bumbling villain who's in every book. Like, he was much more in the background manipulating things.
Yeah, and I think he works so much better that way as well, where he wasn't actually in the book, mentioned a lot, but he didn't show up here necessarily.
Yeah.
So anyway, like, just starting this thing out, it's been a while since we've had a book that just kind of started with one of the team off doing their own thing, and they go and use their power, quote unquote, to do whatever they want. And here's another case of Tobias, like, all right, I'm going to try and do some good with my superpower, quote unquote. And he notices a search party out in the forest looking for this little boy who's deaf and blind, I guess. And he's fallen into some hole or something. And, he takes a big risk, I guess, in revealing himself and going down and telling his father to follow him, and leads him to his kid. Does a good thing.
Yeah, I really feel like, this plot is important. It's a great setup for an opening kind of sequence, especially setting up the rest of the book. At the same time, I can't help but think, like, man, that dad really messed up losing this kid. You're gonna take a deaf and dumb kid into the deep into the mountains, and then you don't watch him extra carefully. Or leave his side even for a second,
Or put him on a leash.
Or, this, I don't want to sound too mean, but couldn't you have taken him to just, the local forest? I don't think it would have changed, or, your backyard with some trees. It wouldn't have changed the experience a lot.
I don't even know, honestly, why they had to make the kid have, disabilities.
Yeah, he could have been a normal kid who got lost in the woods.
Yeah, it'd be just as sympathetic. Really.
Other than maybe representation, which I'm all for, but not stick him down a hole representation.
Yeah, a flooding hole.
Maybe just to make it more sympathetic. Maybe that was the case. I'm not sure, but maybe so that if Tobias morphed and stuff in front of him, or it's more believable the kid wouldn't be a very good witness. Even that sounds mean. I'm not sure. I don't know why they chose to do this.
I don't know either, but I think it just adds more to the stakes. Because, Tobias describes how he's flying and it's starting to rain. And ordinarily, I guess for a human, that wouldn't be a big deal necessarily. But for Tobias, it's like being pelted by little water bullets, and it just kind of raises the stakes a little bit, makes the kid more sympathetic, I guess. Either way,
and don't get me wrong, Tobias searching for a kid lost in the woods, even though they've kind of hit that story point before, was a great opener of the book, and it shows how he is better in his hawk form in some ways than he was as a human.
Oh, totally. Yeah, he wouldn't be very helpful to this situation in human morph.
No, or even if he was just a normal animorph. Well, even if he was just a normal animorph, and he heard about a kid lost in the woods. Tobias knows these woods. He knows these mountains. He knows the best way to search them. He's actually specifically good for this.
He knows where the best shrews are.
Yeah, if a kid's chasing a shrew, he'll find them quick.
He can locate the best free range skunks to eat. Cassie approved.
It definitely starts this book off with a bang, and gets us back in that Tobias mindset. So, every Tobias book is good for a reason, but this one specifically was a great start. Most
importantly, it's an inciting incident, really, that leads us to Tobias randomly getting blindsided by an eagle, and wakes up in a vet office. But it's a very strange transition, I'm sure when I read this, as other people read this, I thought there would be more to it.
Yeah, it seems so specific to say a golden eagle knocks him out. You think Rachel's up to something, or I don't know. I almost would have preferred him getting like trying to fly next to the helicopter and accidentally misjudging a wind current or something and knocking into it, or something relevant to what's happening rather than something that's going to make you think something else is going on for a minute.
Well, it just seemed like maybe that opening scene was written before the rest of the plot was written, and when they tried to link up the opening scene to the rest of the thing, they're like, okay, well, how the heck do we get Tobias into a vet's office, right here in chapter 3? And they're like, just whatever. He's attacked by another bird.
It's great. Tobias, this whole time, he's thinking, he's very much in the mindset of thinking about his hawk life versus his human life. It's already starting that kind of current line of thinking throughout the rest of the book. It's starting that now. And then him, when he gets knocked out and put in a vet's office, it specifically shows him that his actions, even his good actions, have consequences. And he's really in a bind being trapped in a vet's office because everyone's telling the story of this miraculous hawk that talked to the father using, psychic mind melding. And, the story is getting out that a special hawk helped save this kid. And he's trapped in a cage and knows that both maybe the Animorphs, but definitely the Yeerks are going to hear this story and know something's up.
Yeah, and to make matters worse, there's cameras and stuff all within the lab, so he can't just morph his way out of this. And he's basically stuck sitting in the cage until someone shows up. And wouldn't you know it, it's the Yeerks who show up first.
Yeah, with the Animorphs quickly behind. They show up as well. So Rachel's the first one to see them. But Yeerks show up first and start banging down the door. Which
it's almost like a little bit different of a battle scene, though, because it's like he notices that there's, some Hork-Bajir fighting other Hork-Bajir and stuff. Like there's two different factions, maybe, battling it out for him. And coincidentally, Taylor shows up there. And she's like, his trigger, basically.
If we haven't alluded to the other story enough, or if you didn't listen to that episode or pay attention, there's another Animorphs book that introduces Taylor character, and she basically tortured Tobias for half the book. Some pretty horrible torture to the point where people were surprised it showed up in an Animorphs book. It was pretty graphic.
It wasn't that graphic.
It was graphic, man. It's
PG torture.
It was like PG-12 torture.
They tell you he was in pain, and you believe it.
Yeah, but he's also like, his mind is racing, and like he's actively getting PTSD while it's happening. I remember us talking about that book.
He's hooked up to a pain machine. It's not like she's, plucking feathers or...
Yeah, but he describes
cutting off fingers or anything.
It's like you're trying to tell me that when somebody casts the Cruciatus for curse in Harry Potter, that's not torture, all right? That's graphic torture.
I know. All I'm saying is that there's a large difference between a pain machine box that makes you feel pain and then the very graphic process of... bodily mutilation and the pain and harm that comes with that.
But it also specifically described the emotional pain, and that was graphic to me.
Look, I'm not trying to argue. Abuse is abuse, and clearly he was not in a good situation. So that's his most memorable, memory about this Taylor character is that she's just a psychopath that is very willing to harm and kill as she sees fit in order to, get her purpose. And
she was a messed up looking character before because her whole backstory is being a voluntary host to fix all these injuries she had to her. She was missing an arm and her face is all messed up and burned and all this stuff. But she's even worse looking now since she basically survived like an explosion in the last book with her.
She's got some battle damage, yeah.
Yeah. So it's a nice it's an interesting character because she's got the dichotomy of being like a beautiful model who lost her looks. And so she turned to the Yeerks to make her beautiful again.
It's almost too bad that they didn't have a little bit more interaction between Taylor and Rachel. I think they could have made some really interesting comparisons between the two of them, but for the most part, in this book, they're kind of relegated to the whole cat and mouse kind of style of relationship.
If you think about it, Rachel's arch enemy is David, this dweeby little kid, and then Tobias, who's also a dweeby little kid, his arch nemesis is this model-looking girl. So it's like they've switched nemeses.
I suppose that's true. I just think this Taylor character could be a really interesting recurring villain, I guess. But we'll see where that goes.
You know what I would have loved to see happen in the series that never did? Take one of the bullies that always used to mess with Tobias and give him a yerk, and have this character who is like tracking down Tobias, who is literally in the body of one of his old bullies. That would be pretty crazy.
Could work. Could work, McClung. I'll give you that.
I want to read that nemesis.
Well, let's see here. So this is all kind of still in the setup phase of the plot here. Taylor does manage to make it out of there with Tobias, despite the Animorphs' best efforts in this kind of chaotic scene that unfolds at the vet's office. When Tobias wakes up again, Taylor right away goes into demonstrating that she's not above torturing again, even when she's there to basically ask for help.
Yeah, and she's definitely prodding him with remembering his torture and messing with him. Which is, just bad. She's triggering him left and right.
Sure, and it brings up the previous story and is just a good refresher for the readers. Tobias does a lot of just introspection, a lot of recalling the past, a lot of questioning himself, his motives, thinking about Taylor, what she's all about.
Yeah, her go-to prodding and torture of him, other than pushing a button, him literally being tortured, is messing with him and saying that he's more bird than human, or he's a better bird than he is human, or he'll never be able to regain his humanity. That's her go-to button to push.
Except instead of humanity, it's andalinity. I don't know, because she thinks he's an andalite still.
Yes, switch out humanity with andalite.
But her whole thing, as you just said, is all about getting under his skin, pushing his buttons,
ruffling his feathers.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, 100%. That's what she does. That's what she does to him.
But her what she tells him she's up to in this book is that as much as she hates the Andalite bandits, Visser 3 has overstepped his craziness, and he has had it out for her. And so she is now plotting against Visser 3 and she's joined the Yerk Peace movement just out of her hatred for Visser 3, which actually sounds believable. It doesn't sound crazy. Yerks are all about that anyway, so...
Yeah, that's the only reason why it's believable at this point in the story is because, here's another clear, classic example of Yerk trying to overthrow Yerk.
Which is cool because it's our bias of what we know of Yerks. Even though we've seen peaceful Yerks and we've seen Yerks trying to do different, our biases towards them in this point in the series actually helps us believe this lie, which is pretty complex for an Animorphs books.
A little bit. I mean, she does drop basically every hint or flat out tell that she is planning to screw them over throughout all this. And that's the whole point of the book is Tobias is, questioning it. Because at one point he even mentions how it's like he's defending her to the other Animorphs because he wants to go along with this plan.
But even that's believable because she flat out tells them when she recaptures them that she still hates them. It's not, even if her story was 100% true and she did join the Yerk Peace movement, they would still have to be wary of them because of their past interaction. So even that's not a lie. It's 100% true that they have to not trust her completely.
Yeah, totally. If anybody could trust her, it would probably be Tobias just because he knows her the best.
Or can at least maybe stay one step ahead of her.
Sure. And they do have a mental, like it's like a mental game between them where he's like trying to figure her out while at the same time trying to remain above her mental mind games. It's an interesting, what would you call it? An interesting back and forth between these characters. Anyway, she proves that, she's at least on the level with some of her BS-ery here, and she lets Tobias go. He's suspicious in that, he thinks maybe she planted a tracking device on him or something, so he morphs into his smallest morph to see if there's anything to that, and discovers that she's not telling any lies. She's not bugging him or anything like that to find out the location of the Andalite bandits.
It's nice to have these parts in the book that, like, cover the bases, so that you're not thinking, oh, well, why didn't she just track him then? Why didn't she do this? Like, when the book actually points that out, it's nice. I appreciate it.
Totally. And then it leads to one of my favorite sentences that I think if you search for, like, if you were able to look at the transcripts of all of our episodes, this next sentence is one that I think you'd find like hundreds and hundreds of times. But it is, the team meets up at Cassie's barn.
Yeah, they never really got a different meeting place. It's interesting that at the end of the series they meet up at the Free Horkwatir Valley all the time. But between when they're just normal humans, it's really just the barn, the mall, food court is a big one.
Yeah, a lot of times in the mall.
The occasional Marco's apartment, but that's pretty rare.
Dude, this book has the team meets up at Cassie's barn and the mall food court.
Oh, and Axe's Scoop. They go to Axe's Scoop every once in a while.
Yeah, rarely. It's more just in the forest.
Mm-hmm.
There's been significantly less talk of Axe's Scoop than I thought I recalled from...
I would take an entire book on a scoop. I wish they would have had an Axe book where it showed him, like, making a scoop.
Yeah. Like a full-on Earthship home.
Yeah. But anyway, they go to the barn, and it's just a big conversation about not trusting Taylor.
Yeah, definitely. There's some really good dialogue throughout this whole book. I think all the character interactions are all really spot on. Like I said earlier, it's not quite the team that we used to know. This is who they've become now.
Well, that's what's great about it is because, it's 100% they nail the characters, but they don't just nail them the last time we saw them in true to form of who we know. We actually, in this book, see an evolution of who they are. Marco is definitely that cold point A to point B character, but he's also starting to soften to a couple of things. He's been through some things with his mom now that he's rational but can show a little more empathy. Rachel is definitely becoming that, crazed warrior, barely thinking about what she's saying anymore.
She's excited to go to the Yerk Pool now.
Mm-hmm. Which none of them have ever been, Jake is way more reserved and kind of distant, which I thought was super, super great evolution for his character and where he should be.
It feels like it's been a long time since Jake has been like cracking jokes and, not playing the strict leader.
Yeah, he's making these hard choices and then kind of just like spacing out, which is kind of scary. And Tobias is just a bundle of stress and emotions and depression.
He's doing great.
Axe is the only one who's kind of just like, he's becoming a better warrior. He's basically on the same path he was with the Andalites. He's the only one who signed up for this war, so he's mentally the healthiest probably of all of them.
Maybe. I seem to remember him dealing with some crap in that last book, but...
Yeah, but he's dealing with stuff like a normal soldier in the Andalite army would deal with, like killing, how does that make me feel? Things like that. It's still, and he's being confused.
Should I betray my race? We'll see.
Is my tail fur getting a little long? I don't know. I don't have a reference anymore.
Well, after this whole debate, they're all pretty much in agreement that this Taylor girl is just a scumbag and they can't really trust her, but they're going to try and go along with it. Jake thinks it could be a pretty important mission if they have her backing them up.
Tobias talks them into it too. What I think is great about his interaction with Taylor, and specifically how he talks about Taylor to the rest of his friends, he is gung-ho to interact with her again. It's like almost Stockholm Syndrome without the love. Like, you become obsessed with a person who impacted your life so hardcore, you know? So it's not that he wants to trust her, but he wants to continue going through the motions of whatever this mission is so that he can get closure or whatever his mind is kind of convincing him of.
Yeah, he thinks, he's the only one that can deal with her, really, because they've got this weird history. And
Did she tell him the plan yet, or what the mission is, or did she just say it was a big one?
No, right now she left it at, let's get in touch. Here's this website where you can find us, and the team agrees to go and check out the website. I find it really funny that, the only way they are able to trust this website in doing this is to have Axe build this, like, untraceable supercomputer that they're all gathered around out in the forest, and it's like cobbled together. They all compliment him on how good of a job he did.
So basically he created like a simple VPN.
Yeah, a firewall, I believe they call it. And they check out this website, and it's kind of just like this message board, and they leave their little signature on there from the bandits. Let's do this.
I'm picturing like a GeoCities website with like sparkly stars and everything you can imagine.
Right, and then it says like an hour later she got back to him saying, "Hey, let's meet up at the mall." And that's where the scene shifts once again. And what we didn't mention earlier is that in one of their scuffles earlier on, Tobias did manage to acquire Taylor.
Yeah, and when he was in the cage, he tried to like zone her out by acquiring her, which it helped. Got him out of there.
Oh yeah, and so he agrees, to be the one to go meet her at the mall. And to kind of throw her off, he is going to use her as his morph. Although it is the, unharmed, like perfect original version of the DNA. So he's got all of her limbs and hair and whatnot. And
which this is classic person who's been bullied reaction to try to bully someone else. He doesn't think it through in the sense that really this is just hurting Taylor's, like Taylor, the host, not the Yerk. And the Yerk, gets a handle on it pretty quick and mocks him for, showing up as Taylor, and he feels bad about it. So it's really like someone who doesn't know how to be assertive, trying to play mind games.
Yeah, a little bit. This is also, I think, one of the first times in the series that we've had a male character go to a female morph.
Well, also, multiple times in this book, we're seeing them morph humans and other sentient creatures in a way we haven't seen them do it before. They didn't have any big conversations on it. They just did it, and it's what we've been asking for since book like 12.
Oh, absolutely. They've gotten to the point where they're no longer really discussing morality of human morph. Now it's more of like, if we need it, we need it, That's what it's all about. And
which is smart. I mean, it shows maturity in their warfare.
Yeah, it was really funny. There's a nice passage here. Maybe I can read this quick. Let's see. So this is him, Tobias, just kind of like experiencing this Taylor morph. And I'm going to read this page here. The high school kid behind the counter stared wide-eyed. 1, make that 2 very attractive girls were closing in on him. What can I get you? He asked shakily. Decaf latte with skim, Taylor purred. The kid turned to take my order. I smiled, and he almost fell over. It was crazy to have such power. I'd been on the receiving end before. I'd just never been the source. Is this what Rachel experienced? Was this part of what made her so brave? So, this is honestly, I could do an entire book of just the characters, not even like fending off threats from the Yeerks, but experiencing different like bodies and the different social impacts and stuff like that. That's far more interesting to me.
Well, I could even see that tying into Kay Applegate's original plan with the series and kind of a lot of middle grade books where they try to teach you something, or they're trying to show you. Like, Kay Applegate started the series because she wanted people to imagine what it would feel like to be an animal. And she, did a lot of research into each animal for the early books and the morphs so that people could get, like, that feeling or get a glimpse into something they normally wouldn't be able to put into perspective. And so gender swapping and like teenagers understanding maybe what the other gender is going through or feeling or experiencing, and that seems like right up Kay Applegate's alley.
Yeah, absolutely. I could read about it all day. Let's see. So I think it's just a cool scene that, you've got the two Taylors there in the mall. The other team members are kind of all watching, making sure things are going well. There's a tense moment where Taylor's human side, I guess, takes over and pretty much straight up warns Tobias not to trust this girl and to get away. And
well, yeah, you see it with voluntary hosts a lot more as they don't expect their host to take over, their body. So they have an easier way of like picking moments to revolt.
Oh, you think they're less guarded, I guess.
Yeah.
That would make sense. Taylor's probably become pretty comfortable with... Well, I don't understand why she doesn't, at this point, just get a new body, that Yeerk, if Taylor's is all messed up.
Well, because I think with voluntary hosts, it's probably important for them to keep the same Yeerk, because, maybe that helps with them being passive.
It's possible. And again, that's another thing that I think would be really interesting going into. We got a little bit of it, in like Visor or any of the other books that have been very Yeerk-centric, like with Aftran and whatnot. But
plus, she does get some quote-unquote powers with this body, so, there's advantages.
I suppose. It seems like her only power, though, is like she gets a gun.
Well, she has finger paralyzers.
Oh, her little taser things. Yeah, I guess you're right. It's a very sophisticated prosthetic arm they've come up with. Mm-hmm. Well, anyway, Taylor reveals to Tobias that the big plan here now is to tunnel underneath the Yeerk pool so that they can blow it up with a gas line. Okay.
Which this really shows us where we are in the series, because this is a target. They've had little missions before where they're doing, we're going to stop them from building a mobile Kendrona. We're going to stop them from doing this. This is blowing up the Yeerk pool. This is not messing around anymore.
Yeah, and I feel like it's come up once before, the attack on the Yeerk pool, and whether or not, they should just outright cause an explosion there because of all the they've human deaths it would cause.
Yeah, they've mentioned offhand something like that. This is the first time that they're like debating it.
Yeah, exactly. It's come up now, and although the team says they want to do it, Cassie, of course, is going to be the one who raises the moral questions, and ultimately she backs out from this. It makes a lot of sense for her character.
Well, yeah, we see a lot of books where they pussyfoot around the idea of something being too much, or if any of the characters get cold feet or don't want to do it for some reason, usually they back that character or find another way. This is the first time that you have Cassie saying, no, I absolutely will not do this. This is evil. I don't care if it's for the greater good. And you have the rest of the Animorphs being like, this is too big of a target. It doesn't matter the consequences, and they're really separated.
Right, yeah. I really liked Jake and Cassie's interactions in this book, too. It's definitely a huge change in the direction that their relationship has been going since, basically the beginning of the series.
It's definitely a betrayal, Cassie stepping away, because they kind of hinted at before, if any of the Animorphs don't want to do a mission, and Jake asked all the time, whether anyone has any objections and stuff. But when one of the Animorphs backs out or almost backs out in the past, it's not just them saying, hey, I'm not going to contribute to this mission. It's basically not giving the others that protection of numbers. They're always outnumbered. But, 6 will always be 1,000 times better than 5, your chances of survival on any mission.
Yeah, totally. Okay, so here's another passage I'd just like to read, because this is the main one between Cassie and Jake that I think really shows their progression. And this is during their debate about whether or not they should just outright blow up the Yeerk pool. Cassie's trying to counter that the peace movement Yeerks could be amongst the crowd. So the peace movement Yeerks are a small minority, Jake countered coldly. We can't really consider them, except maybe to warn them. Not consider them, Cassie repeated disbelievingly. What if your brother's at the pool when the gas explodes? Jake looked at his hands. I guess it's a sacrifice I have to deal with in order to protect thousands more, Jake said, his voice now expressionless. Jake, I don't believe you. You should, he said, looking back at Cassie. Besides, family involvement doesn't really come into play here. It can't. The Yeerk pool is a target. End of discussion. It's not like we're bombing a bunch of innocent people at the mall on a Friday afternoon. And that's pretty much the end of it.
You missed the greatest next sentence where Cassie's like,
Isn't it? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So that's how she feels here at this point in time, and it makes a whole lot of sense, really.
Which you gotta think. So what's crazy is the levels that are going on here with both Jake and Cassie. You have Jake, who has become this kind of cold warrior. He's willing to do any target and convince himself that he'll be fine killing Tom. But also, he is becoming like 100% biased and racist against the Yeerks. And for good reason. I mean, the Yeerks are evil and trying to kill them most of the time. But he's really shown his bias. He doesn't think of them, even though they're 100% sentient creatures and have a life, and that should matter. He is already starting to think of them as just numbers on a war board.
Exactly.
And Cassie, as much as everybody loves to shit on her, including us, she's right. She's 100% right in this instance that. Not only she brings up she's seen the levels that the rest of them aren't seeing because they're not empathizing. She knows that the Yeerk peace movement could be involved, and they're specifically the target. So she sees that before anyone. Yeah,
totally. And just for Jake, I mean, he is now looking at the biggest, grandest picture there is, and that is the fact that they're in a war where their humanity and their freedom is at stake here, and his only goal at this point is to make sure that the Yeerks are no longer a threat to humanity, and yeah, it's to any end,
Which you got to think, it's hard to, and we'll have these philosophical discussions about war all the time, but if you look at a war, the last war where there was really a good side and a bad side, like World War II. Like, you look at that, there was almost definitively a side that was in the wrong. And how many U.S. soldiers or British soldiers or Australian soldiers did horrifying things and lost their souls for the greater good? We're not going to wish that never happened because of how much good it did in the end, shutting down the Axis, front. So,
Right.
The Holocaust, that's worth sacrificing individuals' morals and, personal mental health to stop.
Yeah, look, in these situations of war and fighting and unnecessary deaths, there has to be some point where you just have to guarantee your survival.
But
and that's the way that Jake is looking at it currently, is that I'm looking after me and mine, and it sucks that unnecessary deaths have to happen, but until we have our guaranteed freedom and safety, yeah, he's a Yeerk exterminator.
But I have to say, maybe it's my older age, I'm starting to empathize with something with Cassie almost more, because I really like the idea of that old school Superman line of thought. What if we just never did wrong? What if every choice, no matter the consequences, no matter what was at stake, we always just did the right thing? That Captain America way of thinking.
That brings up a really interesting what if scenario, and that's what if Cassie was the de facto leader of the Animorphs, and like you said, yeah, she made calls that Jake would never make, in that, you know, we're gonna do this the absolute most lawful good we can, you know. And I could see a really cool, like, alternate timeline what if kind of story with Cassie being the leader and Jake trying to overthrow her eventually.
I'm just personally starting to respect that a lot more. Like, I feel like I don't know, maybe it's just more the world that I'm seeing as an adult, but I feel like we've really lost a moral backbone of what's right and what's wrong. It doesn't matter what we're doing or what policies are right or what is affected by doing whatever or making the logical choice. What if we always just made the right choice? How different of a country or persons would we be? That's something that's starting to matter a lot more to me.
Yeah, and Cassie's definitely the idealist of the team, the one who wants to take the high road everywhere. And she's obviously had to break and change a lot of those codes that she values. But, I mean, even in this book, it shows that she did the right thing, right?
Yeah, no, she was right.
By the end of this, we'll get to.
Vastly in the right in this book. To the point where they all would have died if it wasn't for Cassie making the choice she thought was right.
No, totally. Yeah, she's MVP this round. So
not Tobias, definitely not Tobias.
Tobias does some stuff. He is helpful here, kind of, sort of.
He does the best with his broken brain that he can in this book.
Very much so. So, you know, it's Tobias's decision that he is going to be the one to follow Taylor's plan and go acquire a Taxon, along with Axe, his good buddy, his good morph buddy, his Shorm. They both go down into this, you know, pumping station tunnel where Taylor has selected the largest, nastiest Taxon male.
Behemoth Taxon. For
them to morph, and they have a little struggle.
It's a dire Taxon.
Ooh, that means they're 10% bigger. And they kill/acquire the poor guy, the poor creature.
Yeah. Tobias just gladiator battles him and Axe. So it's a good time.
How else are you gonna do it?
We're missing the whole kind of cool thing of Tobias going Andalite and kind of Axe walking him through, you know, different forms and like how you should hold yourself while you fight, and you know, love those moments. Like Axe having a brother Andalite to bond with and teach is nice. Yeah,
they really should have included more of Tobias enjoying Andalite morph and more bonding with Axe, of course, is great stuff. They are introducing a little bit more to the Andalite lore every book now, with Axe giving these little details such as the hair cutting process, which is normally supposed to be used to kind of discipline young Andalites that act out.
But they need him to look different than Axe, so that's why they do it in this.
Yeah, it's to alter his appearance. I don't know.
Even little things like Axe telling him how he should land after a larger than 3 foot fall, you know, on his hooves, and how to control his body. It's just nice little Andalite lore things.
Yeah, we always like learning more about their biology. Still,
for all you Andalite cosplayers out there, you're really getting some RPG elements in this book for you.
That's right. You and me, MorphCon next year. I'll be the rear, the back legs, and the tail, and you'll be the whole front of the Andalite costume.
You almost need like a separate person to be the tail. Or maybe you could hold your daughter and she could like control the tail.
She's just right on my shoulders.
Yeah, that'd be great.
That's one way to do it. We're at the halfway point in this book. And I feel like we've done an amazing job keeping the conversation going for this long. When I read this thing, I felt like plot-wise, there wasn't a whole heck of a lot to discuss, and we'd get through it pretty quick, but way to go. Our deviations are really working out, really paying off here.
Yeah, well, I think even if the plot seems thin in this book, it's because there's so much else going on in Tobias's head with the other Animorphs, conversations. I think dialogue is incredibly strong in this book.
It's just, it's a lot to discuss. Absolutely. And, we've had the setup. We've had the whole mission laid out for us. Now we're going to see the mission in action, see how it goes. And this is where the team is meeting up to start the digging, the Taxon digging. I don't even know if we mentioned it, but the Taxons are supposedly really good at digging. They do this kind of the same way earthworms dig, which is obviously through, in one end, out the other. But a much more super sped up version of that. Yeah,
they could dig the English Channel in 3 days or something. It's just so sped up from using a bulldozer or anything else, or an earth mover. It's great, and we get a great thing where they defeated this other Taxon and acquired its morph. It's this massive Taxon, and we get a lot of Taxon lore here too. Even though we've seen how hungry they can be, and we've heard in the Andalite Chronicles specifics even of what it's like to morph a Taxon, I think we get a lot more details here than we've ever gotten before of specifically what that hunger feels like to a human, and how hard it is to control, and how almost impossible it is to control.
Yeah, Tobias has a really good line. I don't know if it's during this time he morphs it or the next time, but he really makes a comparison to the hunger being like fear, like a derivative of fear. And I think he, kind of feels a little bit of compassion for the Taxons, and he feels. I don't want to say he feels like a Taxon, but there's something there.
Yeah, and it just it really makes you better understand why the Taxons are what they are and how we've seen them so far. It even goes to talk about how their interaction with the Yeerks, they're voluntary hosts, but the Yeerks who are assigned to Taxons, even if they look all normal, controlling the controls of a bug fighter and standing around on the bridge of a ship, they become more feral than other Yeerks. The brain affects them and messes with them. So, I thought that was really interesting. You probably can't have a Yeerk or too many Yeerks have a Taxon body and then, you upgrade to something else because they've changed as Yeerks.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure giving a Yeerk a Taxon body is akin to putting them on a drug of some sort.
Yeah.
I guess hunger.
Or cocaine.
Or kind of both, yeah.
Yeah.
So Tobias goes Taxon, starts, has a freak out, has trouble controlling the hunger right away, and starts kind of turning on the team. We've seen this scene play out, numerous times. Taylor shows up and manages to Draken beam, zap him out of it a little bit.
Well, it's funny because Axe had to mess with the Dracon beam she has because she tried to shoot him at full strength. And just kill Tobias right there. But if Axe hadn't interfered, Tobias would be dead.
Also, I should point out that Seropedia points out that Jake tells Tobias that Axe managed to modify Taylor's Draken beam to prevent her from firing past the third setting. However, Axe never had a chance to gain access to her weapon, nor did he possess the time to modify it without her knowledge. So it's just kind of a thing that I think the writers threw in there without thinking about.
He probably used his supercomputer to hack into her Dracon beam
remotely.
Wirelessly.
Oh yeah, of course.
Duh.
No, the computer blew up, I believe.
And he built another one. Axe has nothing to do but build computers.
Either way, there's a little bit of inconsistency, some things that don't quite add up or make sense here, but it's okay. Where are we going? Tobias.
They attacked the team, yeah. All that.
Yeah, and, just Rachel's presence, I guess, being there kind of snaps him out of the Texan hunger a little bit as well. He learns kind of how to focus it and aim it at the dirt and tunnel and his goal there, and they get going on that. He discovers, just how amazingly adept at digging these things are.
Yeah, and true to her word, it's not a trick. It's not backup. Cassie is not on the mission. It's just Axe, Tobias, Marco, Rachel, and Jake, and obviously Taylor.
Exactly. After a bit, he runs out of time in Texan Morph, and it's Axe's turn to step up to the plate. And they once again are debating the morality of whether or not they should just blow up the Yerk pool. And we get to see a little bit of Taylor try to pull the old join me and together we can rule the universe.
She said that almost directly. Like, it almost quotes Star Wars.
Yeah, basically. So that's her new goal is it a mind trick? Does she actually think that maybe Tobias, the Andalite, would turn himself over and her whole goal, I guess, would be to gain an Andalite body for herself.
Yeah, well, I mean, right. She's already got a voluntary host. I think her goal would be it'd be the ultimate form of putting him in his place below her, is to actually take over his body.
Definitely. And, it's just a much better body. Should be on par with Visor 3 and much better poised for ruling.
Or if you want to put it in perspective of the plot, since we know that she's lying and that she's actually working for Visor 3, this could be her Visor 3's one shot at possibly taking any of them alive. Because if the plan goes according to plan perfectly, the Andalite bandits and everything in the Yerk pool dies. But Visor 3 would still love to get another Andalite host under his belt.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Maybe he thinks the Andalite mothership will show up again someday and he'll have more opportunities to get Andalite hosts. I don't know. But yeah, that's kind of Taylor's main goal. And I feel like, she has given Tobias so many opportunities and reasons to doubt everything she says. She's obviously demonstrated that all she wants to do is get under his skin and get his body, ultimately. Mm-hmm. And, he still goes along with it and still kind of is willing to work with her and trust her, despite her repeated talk of, when we get in there and take over and things are going to be way different for us. And, it's just like she sounds like any old dictator.
Well, because it's again, he is not seeing everything. He's traumatized by this person, and the rest of the group should have stopped him from interacting with her at all. And instead, they're letting him take the lead on a lot of these decisions because of his past with her. But he's not in his right mind. I think
it's like letting Marco take a lead on Visor 1 mission,
which happens every time. But specifically with Tobias, he's mentally unwell, thinking about his former interaction with her. So this entire book, if it has any point, it's that he's suffering PTSD and plenty of other syndromes, I'm sure, in dealing with Taylor. And he's not in his right mind throughout this entire book. Or at this point in the series at all. Tobias is starting to lose it, guys. He's been a hawk for a few years, and he's not supposed to be.
He's not doing well. One of the cooler moments I thought was when he did morph into Taylor, and he was like, I was hoping to gain some insight, how her mind worked, and he's like, I discovered that there was none of that there. She was just a sweet, normal little girl, basically, and all that nastiness is from the Yerk, really. It's just a nice little turnaround to find that, Taylor herself is not the problem. Problem's the Yerk.
Yeah, exactly. And and it's just a bad situation on every side. And plot wise, after she's trying to, get Tobias to join her side, whether that's a trick or not, Axe, who seemed like he was more comfortable in this morph than Tobias, is starting to go a little crazy, and then he's just starting to dig this cavern instead of a tunnel.
This is kind of an amusing scene, I thought, because, first of all, a little bit more lore expansion on the Texans is that they have this kind of like, almost like a hibernation mode to combat their hunger, where they basically just sort of shut down their non-essential features in their minds and, like I said, kind of hibernate. And, using this method, he's like, oh, I got this, I'm in charge. And then he just starts going to town, right? And they discover that he's basically eating himself to death, just overexerting the Texan, running out of time in morph. And, it's another instance of, somebody's going to die in morph, and we have to convince them to morph out quick.
Yeah, and that's Bat Tobias. He morphs Bat and finds him, and they figure out what he's doing and convinces him out of that. I want to leave the plot real quick for another tangent. Things that we missed and didn't talk about that I think are incredible in this book.
Sure.
One, we get a flashback. I don't remember where it is, but I remember we get a flashback when Tobias is thinking about a big question in this book is whether he stayed a Nothlet or became a Nothlet and stayed in Hawkmorph on purpose or not. And we actually get a flashback in his mind of him sitting on the cavern wall in the Yerk pool in the first book, watching the other Animorphs leave. So we saw a part of the first book from his perspective in this book, which I thought was incredible and so well done.
That's coming up once they actually break through the wall and reveal.
Okay,
the,
so that hasn't happened yet. One thing that did happen though is when Tobias was morphing out of Taxon, and it was Axe's turn to take over. We get some amazing morph lore in the sense that Tobias manages. He starts morphing out of his Taxon morph and realizes that Taylor is there and she's staring right at him, and he manages to morph to Andalite from Taxon by perfectly morphing the hawk parts and blending them as he morphed and basically went from one morph to another. So this vastly expands the morph lore in one instance.
This is a super impressive feat. It's something that we've been asking for quite a while now, a major expansion on the morphing ability, something you'd expect to see Cassie do, frankly, but Tobias should have just as much morph ability as her, if not more, because of his, Andalite lineage.
But this is not even something we see Axe ever do. Like, this is showing what the limits are of the morphing ability in I feel like the Andalites, it's a technology they're used to, so they know, and just by Andalite personality, they know the limits of it, and they don't really test that. Whereas humans are going to push it and experiment with it, and then you have instances like Cassie being artful with her morphs, and then something like this where Tobias is actually pushing the technology to do more than it should be capable of.
Yeah.
That's what I want out of the series. That's what I've always wanted.
It reminds me of way earlier on in the series. It might have been like book 5, I think. Yeah, I think it was The Capture, where Jake becomes a controller.
That's book 6.
Book 6, you're right. He partially morphs like just his throat into wolf to give him like a different, voice when he calls Tom at the end. Mm-hmm. Stuff like that is what they should have been doing, like have an instance where maybe they're out in public and they couldn't fully morph into something, so maybe he turns his hand into a lobster claw and uses it to a factor. Just doing morphing in a slightly different way.
We're seeing a lot of our requests in the morphing ability being done in this book. Morphing humans, morphing Andalites, taking these abilities to the next level. And I'm sorry to say it's so late in the series and we don't even get to see more of that in the next few books. So
I would like to see Tobias just start morphing an Andalite tail while he's still in his hawk body. So he's just a hawk with a big scorpion Andalite tail.
Well, I think the things they could do are more things like this. You might, if we continue down this track, I feel like at their apex of morphing ability, you might be able to see them mixing morphs. Like,
yeah, I was totally just gonna say, or doing it to where, like, if you're in a human body, you could morph an Andalite tail on your right arm, you know?
Yeah, and it's not just about like what you can, how you can change the morphing ability itself, but even the acquiring ability. We've seen Axe acquire multiple humans to make a new human. Surely there's more you can do with that too, in like multiple animals or something.
Oh god, yeah, chimera morphs.
Making like mythological creatures just by mixing animals.
Oh, absolutely. There's a lot of cool morph lore things that unfortunately we're just not probably going to see in this series.
More than anything else, you know what would have made the series incredible? If at the end, in one of the big like final battles of the series, one of them tapped into one of their dinosaur morphs and morphed like a T-Rex into the middle of the chaos.
You say that, however, I think if it actually happened, it'd be one of the moments fans
Incredible.
recognize
It
as
would
being
be
ridiculous.
Absolutely incredible. You cannot tell me if that final battle, where they're like all the, the handicapped Animorphs are running and fighting or whatever, if a bunch of dinosaurs just showed up and it's,
And it's just chaos.
So good.
All right, Tobias takes over digging for Axe, and this is where he just kind of loses himself again to the morph and digs his way in, and they reach the pool really quick. And this is where, while Tobias is having that moment of realization and questioning himself and his motives, Taylor has secretly taken out the rest of the Animorphs and decommissioned them with her little stun beams. And she's got one last, kind of mind routine to try and pull on Tobias. And once again, join me, and your transformation will be complete. Right?
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And this is kind of the big dramatic climax, the reveal that Taylor doesn't really have anybody's best interests here except her own in mind. And she's like, all right, screw it. Things aren't going my way. Tobias isn't going to listen to me. I'm just going to go ahead and break this here gas line and see how you guys
like, you're
do.
not going to do it. You'll die too. And she's like, whatevs. And then pops up. And
then clearly you don't know me yet. Bam.
And then they set up for a potential bringing her back by she's the first one out the hole.
She gets blasted like Team Rocket style.
So who knows? But it's like, oh, she was smiling while she did it, so maybe she survived somehow.
I do like the description Tobias gives a little bit, like towards the end of their conflict here before she gets blown away, where, she totally looks like just a psychopath now. Her hair's all crazy and she's got facial scars and
yeah, because he used to think of like even when she was all messed up looking, he was like he could see how beautiful she was, and he was kind of jealous of that, and that she was even before her accident, she was someone who was popular and pretty, and he never had that.
Right. So if we do see a return, I think she's just gonna be loopy. She's gonna be out there. But everyone's kind of dying as they tend to end their missions. These Animorphs.
Tobias manages to keep them all from blowing out of the Yerk pool, but there's no oxygen. They're all just suffocating. And through sheer force of will, and I thought this is kind of a cool moment, Tobias he notices that the Taxon isn't as affected by toxic atmosphere as the rest of them, so he pushes them all out with his head, like his face is right there, his mouth is right there, and he says it's the hardest thing he's ever done is not eat his friends while he's trying to save them.
I liked his mental screaming basically is they're friends, not food. The whole time.
Yeah.
Very Finding Nemo-esque.
He gets them out, and then this is the best part of the book in my mind. He gets them out, and they all, morph respectively back into the whatever will be safe, but they then go back to battle morphs just in case, because they see that the pumping station is all messed up looking. And so I could imagine this perfectly. And I don't know if you call this bad writing, but I knew this was coming the second they saw that the pumping station was all messed up. They're creeping through the pumping station. They're seeing all these, not
dead bodies.
Well, some of them are dead, but like mostly messed up with Yeerks crawling out of their heads. And
horrible. If the Yeerks are crawling, like abandoning the hosts, it's a bad situation. They're not going to.
Yeah. So everything's messed up. Sparks flying everywhere. Probably things hanging out of the ceiling. All this stuff, and they're creeping through it, like waiting for this battle, and it's just not coming, and not knowing what's going on. And then they find Cassie crying in the back, and this is like her going full Eric when he gets his chip removed.
Sure, yeah. Very much like that.
Yeah, and she just wasted this entire pumping station full of human beings to save them and to save their souls, basically, because she thought she was stopping them blowing up the Yeerk pool.
So, okay,
which she
from her
was.
perspective, yeah. But what she didn't know, I guess, was that she was totally saving all their lives.
So again, she was not only did Cassie, sweet little Cassie, moral Cassie, just, kill a bunch of humans, she did it as a betrayal to her friends and to save the Yeerks. What more do you want from an Animorphs book? This is an amazing end to this book. It's incredible.
The implications are pretty nuts. They're pretty different from what we've had before, yeah.
It's a big foreshadowing to how this group is going to be split in just the coming books. It's just great stuff.
Yeah, and we get a final. This felt like a really a wrap up, rappy chapter for a finale here, where Tobias and Rachel kind of go flying together as they tend to do, and just sort of have a conversation about what happened. And it's at this point where it's pretty much spelled out. Rachel says, we think that Taylor was probably just working with Visor 3 the whole time, and they were plotting to take out both the Andalite bandits and the Peace faction. And, Visor 3, his mind was, I'm going to destroy my enemies and allies alike. And I think it's a good contrast here, because it sort of flirts with the idea of, okay, Visor 3 was planning on sacrificing his own kind as well as the enemies, good and bad alike. And the Animorphs were planning on doing the same thing. And I think it gives them all a little bit, or at least it gives Rachel and Tobias a moment to think I'm glad we didn't do the same thing that Visor 3 would have done.
Yeah. No, so that's the book. We get a nice little wrap-up chapter, too, between Rachel and Tobias, and just kind of discussing everything. And
yeah, that's what I just said. Were you listening?
I was listening. I was just commenting on it. I'm not trying to usurp you.
Okay.
No, I just wanted to bring it home that this reflects the earlier talk that Tobias and Rachel had in her room, because she's the first one. We didn't really go over this, but she's the first one that he goes to after Taylor captures them for a second time, before they go back to Cassie's barn. He has to talk with Rachel, so you get this nice mirroring of that conversation and kind of resolution. And then they tack on the fact that Visitor 3 was behind all of this, which it has more consequences for the rest of the book if you think back to different things Taylor was doing. But
right,
if you don't mind, I'd like to just go straight to my review real quick.
No, yeah, let's dive into it, man. We're there.
Okay. I don't need to say much more than this is on par. This nemesis of Tobias's, this second part to Taylor's story. I don't think we get a third part at all, but this, resolution or whatever, is right up there with the David trilogy for me. I never realized that there was another kind of villain on par with David in the series, and I think Taylor hits that home, mostly because of how well written this book is and how perfectly Animorphs it is. Everything I want out of an Animorphs book, I got in this book, and how the resolution, the morph lore, advancing their characters and where they should be at this point in the series. It's just easily a 5 out of 5 Animorph nemesis. For me, if I could give it a 6, I'd give it a 6. I think it's right up there with David.
Oh, that's surprising.
And that's high praise for me.
That's a pretty high praise, I will say. Well, I'm glad that we have pretty different opinions, I guess. While you're very wowed by this whole thing, I more or less enjoyed the book. I'm not as floored as you are. It had a lot of positives. Like I said, a lot of character progression, a wonderful villain to move things along. As far as like story goes, I didn't think it was the greatest Animorphs plot we've had. A lot of the things like questioning morality and stuff, we've had books where they do that before. Like I said, I think there's a lot of great foreshadowing in this one. If anything, this book asks a lot of interesting questions that I think when we get around to finding the answers to will be a lot more interesting. Again, when I was reading this thing, I felt like not a whole lot happened, and it was only through going back through it, talking with you about it, rereading it to do my summary a little bit, is where I found a little bit more enjoyment with it. But like we've said, it's a lot more introspection, a lot of thought-provoking questions, and really good dialogue between all the characters. A little less heavy on the action if you're reading these things for that. I don't necessarily think it's one you'd have to read. Like you said, you could probably avoid the whole David trilogy if you wanted, but you're missing out on a good book that, makes the Animorphs what it is. And for that, I feel like, yeah, it's a pretty solid Animorphs book. Not 5 out of 5 for me material, but it's at the very least definitely a 3 out of 5 Notalsiths for me.
Look, you're here for the crazy Battlemorph action scenes. I'm here for the crippling depression that emotionally stunts the characters, and that's what this book had in spades. And I think this is definitely... I mean, we've given some pretty mediocre books a 3 out of 5, so I'm a little surprised by your score. I'd at least get a 4. But just for the writing alone, I mean, I thought the dialogue is like some of the best of the whole series in this book. Like the characters felt more real in this book than they have in a long time.
While it was well written, I don't see. I wouldn't put it up there with. Well, I wouldn't use the word best of the series. I think it's very well written and it accomplishes what it needs to for this story, but I just left me wanting more, I guess, wanting to move on to something a little bit more earth-shattering within the story.
I think there's different ways that books can be rated in the Animorphs series because of how specific they are. And while I don't think this is the best book in the series, I don't even think it's maybe even in the top 5. It could be, but I know there's some really good books coming and some books that I love in the past, and it'd be hard to even make a top 5. I think this might be Tobias's best book. I think this might be the best Tobias book, which is saying a lot.
Maybe. I still like the first Tobias book, honestly. But.
Yeah, but the first Tobias book is, I think it has more nostalgia than anything for everyone because it hits all those defining characteristics. It's
sure.
Tobias sleeping in a cabinet in Jake's, attic. How are you not going to get more? That's starting those threads. Whereas I thought this book did something with them. It gave Tobias a personal demon to wrestle with instead of just the woe is me, I'm a hawk. I thought, and again, it was backed up by some of the best of the series writing, I think, easily.
It's absolutely moving Tobias's character in a far more interesting direction. And, I just think Tobias overall is one of the more interesting characters in this series. A lot of people's favorites, in fact. And it makes me want more. But at the same point, I breezed through this one, and I'm looking forward to more to come in the future. Really, is all I could say.
I mean, I'm all for us having different scores on different books because it's I hate when we just line up perfectly because it doesn't really make us dive into why we thought differently about things. But I think that's the perfect way to put this, is that you breeze through this book as an easy read, whereas I couldn't put it down. And that's why I read it in 2 shifts. It's not that it was an easy read for me, it's that I was so interested in everything it was doing that I wanted to see where it went.
Okay, yeah, that's true. I mean, I processed it all very, very much the same as you. It's just, I don't get quite as hung up on the emotion of it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, plus, I mean,
as it were.
You got to give it credit too for the fact that book 43, this manages to do something new with the Morphlore. This manages to do something new with Taxons. This manages to do something new with even just human host bodies. Like that's pretty high praise right there. Is that it was able to do some originality in the series that we haven't seen in a long time.
Hey, the most important thing this book did was erase the journey from my mind. So that right there is beautiful.
Have you read the summary for the next book?
No, but I don't know what to expect except for the unexpected.
I think this is going to be kind of a shit sandwich situation where we've got this great inside covered on each side by poop.
It's very possible. So yeah, like you're saying, we have wound down our review of book 43, The Test, and really excited actually to get into the next book, 44, The Unexpected. Cassie Goes to Australia is best way to describe it.
Which concept-wise, I've never read the Cassie Australia book, but concept-wise, Cassie wrestling with Visitor 3 in the Outback, and she has no support or backup. I mean, that sounds really cool, at least as a concept.
In theory, it should be cool. We shall see.
Plus, we just don't get a lot of international travel. We're so stuck in this one town. I'm looking forward to seeing how the Yeerks are affecting other places, if at all.
Yeah, that'll be very interesting as well. We heard this book is just trash, so trying to keep an open mind.
Hey,
trying to remain hopeful.
They also said that about the Atlantis book, and they were 100% right.
No, they weren't. That book was untapped genius, diamond in the rough material.
Didn't we actually like the Buffy Human book? I can't remember now. I know it was
kind of did up until they ruined the end.
Yeah.
Right up until they nuked the buffalo. our new phrase.
I enjoyed that for other reasons.
Well, either way, we're about to nuke the buffalo on this episode and just roll out the plugs.
Yeah. No, yeah, speaking of which, so we went down from iTunes there for a little bit. I don't know why. I think because we changed the website and different things were happening, I think our feed got messed up. But that is newly corrected. So this episode should pop up much quicker than the other ones. Pip pop. But again, you can check us out on iTunes. If you listen to us, if you listen to us on Android, tell us what you're listening to us on. Because I use Castbox with my new Android phone. And that seems like one of the bigger ones. And I'd love to see some comments pop up on there. We don't have any reviews or comments on Castbox. And I know it's one of the big ones for Android. So let us know what you're listening to us on. Stitcher, just all the big ones. And, leave us a review wherever you are. Leaving those helps out new listeners find the show. It helps introduce us to new people. And hopefully you see our artwork and our new artwork and stuff pop up on there. And go to Thoughtspeakcast.com. Check out our new website. You got a nice Patreon link right there. You got a Twitter feed. You got new episodes and these bright new bold posts. And I'm really excited about that. I'd love to see people comment and use our website and actually comment on the episodes. Because I know our old website was a little wasn't great to look at for that sort of thing or discussion. And I think this new website, specifically I made it for improving that and making it better for commenting. I also have a lot of social links on there, our Twitter, our Facebook. I'd link directly to our Animorphs on Reddit through our website, which I'm a moderator on our Animorphs, so I love our discussion to pop up there. And again, what? Go ahead.
You're flying through this. Good job.
Thanks for interrupting it. Check out our Patreon, which you want to give the HTML for that?
No.
Okay.
I'm enjoying listening to you plug this.
Well, search for Thoughtspeak on Patreon. Or I think it's literally just patreon.com/Thoughtspeak, right?
Something like that. It's Thoughtspeak or Thoughtspeakcast.
That's
I think
terrible.
it's
This is a horrible plug.
Patreon.com//
Here's the great
back.
thing. We've gotten big enough that if you just Google Thoughtspeak, we're pretty much the entire first page. Our Patreon shows up there, everything. But again, I don't want to downplay Patreon. It really helps us continue the show, and we want to get better about episodes and get more regular with them. And seeing you guys contribute on there really pushes us to do that and get these episodes out as quickly as possible. And we have pretty busy lives. We both have pretty demanding jobs and home lives and stuff. But I don't want to stop this podcast. I want it to grow and get better. And the Patreon supports us to be able to do that. And it helped me. I mean, the Patreon helped me buy a new computer because my other computer wasn't handling all of the graphics and everything that we were doing. It was slowing us down. So
the Patreon helped me afford that gold toilet I've always been wanting. Oh, I wasn't supposed to say that out loud.
No, it's great.
Strike
Great
that
stuff.
from the record.
No, but it really has supported us and made us continue doing this, and I can't thank you guys enough for that. So check us out wherever, talk to us wherever, send us questions, send us your what book series you want us to read next, or individual volumes of Goosebumps you want us to read, or whatever you want to do, man. We're ready to go to a bold new frontier with this podcast, and you're gonna see a lot more changes coming.
Tell us what your battle
Animorphs.
morph is.
Yeah, let's keep it Animorphs related, at least for a little while longer. And we'll never forget that this was an Animorphs podcast. So even in the later episodes, I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about Sario rips or whatever when we're talking about Ender's Game. So how that would have bettered that situation.
It always makes it better when you introduce a Sario rip.
What would Ender, his favorite morph, have been? I feel like a parrot or something.
I feel like the queen.
Spoilers.
Yeah. Anywho, you have made it successfully to the end of this episode, and boy, do I envy you. Because now you're going to come back for our next one, The Unexpected. I don't know what to expect for that one.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Did I make that joke? I already did.
You
Doesn't
did.
Matter. It's coming
fine.
up again.
We've got
You can expect that.
We've got one or two more. I think you could call them anything but duds. And then we've just got so many good books still left in the series. And some of the best books of the series are coming up. So stick with us. Let us know what you think. This is Coleman, signing off.
Right on. Like, share, and subscribe. Comment down below. I've been your host, Mitchell. Have a great night, everyone.